Chapter 11. Desert Storm. The following article appeared in the January 10, 1991 Jewish Telegraphic Agency entitled Baker Discusses Arab-Israeli Issue with Iraq, but Makes No Concessions. Fears that the United States might make concessions on the Arab-Israeli peace process in exchange for an Iraqi pullout from Kuwait evaporated after United States Secretary of State James Baker emerged Wednesday from 6 hours of talks with his Iraqi counterpart. Baker said he made clear to Iraqi Foreign Minister Tariq Aziz that the United States would not agree to any specific steps in the Arab-Israeli conflict as a condition for Iraq's withdrawal from Kuwait. The secretary spoke at a news conference here after the marathon meeting with Aziz and his aides, which President Bush later described in Washington as a total stiff arm from Iraq. Baker said, quote, "Rewarding Iraq's aggression with a link to the Arab-Israel peace process would really send a terrible signal not only to continuing peacemakers in the region, but also to other would-be aggressors," end quote. He said his talks with the Iraqis were conducted in a somber mood. "Regretfully, I heard nothing that suggests to me any Iraqi flexibility," Baker said. He reported that Aziz refused to take back to Baghdad a letter from President Bush to Iraqi President Saddam Hussein. In Washington, Bush rejected any linkage of the Israeli-Palestinian issue with an Iraqi withdrawal of forces. "The argument with Saddam is about Kuwait," Bush said during a 45-minute news conference. He said that while he was pessimistic about an Iraqi withdrawal, he had not given up on a peaceful outcome. Aziz, at a news conference of his own in Geneva, said Iraq would attack Israel if the United States attacked Iraq. Questioned about that threat, Bush said, quote, "We are prepared to do what we need to do." He said that not only the United States, but others would respond if a friend in the area was wantonly attacked. He did not specify what the United States would do, but warned Saddam Hussein to think long and hard before he started a war. In Israel, there were conflicting reactions to the apparent failure of the Baker-Aziz meeting to find a peaceful settlement of the Gulf crisis. Defense Minister Moshe Aarons, who watched Baker's news conference, said, "War is nearer." Foreign Minister David Levy, who appeared on television Wednesday evening, predicted that further efforts would be made to reach a peaceful solution before the January 15th UN deadline for Iraq to withdraw from Kuwait. "There had been no surprises and no slamming of the door," Levy observed in a television interview. In Paris, President François Mitterrand said if Iraq did not comply with the January 15th deadline, that an armed conflict would become almost certain. Contrary to earlier indications, France may not move ahead with its own peace initiative. Mitterrand said that while there was no reason in principle why France should not send an emissary to Baghdad, this, in my opinion, wouldn't be useful now, he said. But he made the comment earlier in the day, when it appeared Baker and Aziz were making progress toward a settlement. Mitterrand said he understands that the United States feels an international conference to settle the Arab-Israeli conflict might look like a concession to Saddam Hussein. But the French president made clear that he still favors that approach and had been urging an international conference since 1983. Baker said at his news conference that he told Aziz that Iraq must either comply with the will of the international community and withdraw peacefully, or be expelled by force from Kuwait. But the Secretary of State has stressed that the United States and its international partners have not decided on the use of force and want a peaceful solution. He urged Iraq not to add another miscalculation to the many it has made since it invaded Kuwait, because he said Iraq cannot win a military confrontation. Baker indicated that the only hope for a peaceful outcome might come from United Nations Secretary General Javier Perez de Cuellar, since Iraq is being asked to abide by 12 Security Council resolutions that have passed in the last 5 months. At the United Nations, a spokesman for Perez said the Secretary General was contemplating a diplomatic mission of his own. During the talks in Geneva, Aziz brought up the Arab-Israeli conflict, and there was a long discussion of it, Baker reported. He said he described U.S. efforts to bring about a solution, including the Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty. as well as his own efforts in the region since becoming Secretary of State. Baker said he repeatedly stressed that the Arab-Israeli peace process is separate from the Persian Gulf crisis. Baker said, quote, "I did make the point that I don't think that many people believe that Iraq invaded Kuwait in order to help the Palestinians. And if it did, it was another miscalculation, because it hasn't helped the Palestinians at all." Aziz said at his news conference, which followed Baker's, that if the American administration changes its position and works with us and with the other parties concerned in the region to bring about peace, a comprehensive, lasting peace, we would be very glad and very enthusiastic to participate in that effort. Aziz said he explained that the Palestinian question is a question of national security, that if the Palestinian question is not resolved, we do not feel secure in our country. Israel attacked Iraq in 1981, and we were expecting an Israel attack on Iraq in March and April 1990, Aziz said. Asked if Iraq would attack Israel if attacked by the United States, Aziz said, absolutely yes. In New York, the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations issued a statement Wednesday supporting the Bush administration's policy in the Gulf and applauding its refusal to accept any linkage of the occupation of Kuwait with the Palestinian issue. We trust that this U.S. policy will not be undermined by the attempts of other nations to appease Saddam Hussein or in any way to reward his aggression, said the conference. The following article appeared in the February 22, 1991 Jewish Telegraphic Agency entitled "Iraqi Agreement to Pull Out Troops Could Leave Israel Facing a Threat." Iraq's announced agreement to withdraw from Kuwait under the terms of a Soviet initiative raised new questions about whether Saddam Hussein would emerge from the Persian Gulf War with his armed forces defeated, but still a major menace to Israel. The Iraqi agreement to a full and unconditional withdrawal of its forces from Kuwait was announced in Moscow early Friday morning after Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev met for more than 2 hours with Iraqi Foreign Minister Tariq Aziz. Under the agreement, Iraq said it would begin withdrawing its forces on the second day after a ceasefire and would complete the withdrawal in an unspecified fixed time period. But the agreement also calls for a lifting of all economic sanctions against Iraq once 2/3 of the forces are out of Kuwait, and a nullification of all pertinent United Nations Security Council resolutions once the forces are out entirely. President Bush, who was informed by Gorbachev of the agreement in a telephone call, told the Soviet leader that he had serious concerns about several points in the plan. He said the United States would consult with its coalition partners to formulate a response to the Soviet-Iraqi agreement. But meanwhile, there had been no change in the schedule for prosecution of the war. Earlier in the day, it appeared that Iraq had decided not to surrender and was bracing for an imminent ground assault by U.S.-led coalition forces. In a speech broadcast on Baghdad radio, Hussein had declared that the Iraqi people are willing to continue the war until they reach martyrdom. In vowing to continue the war, Hussein once again demonstrates his determination to maintain the aggression against Kuwait and the absence of compassion for his people and his country. In Jerusalem, Israeli Foreign Minister David Levy told Israel Radio that he was not surprised by the bellicose tone of Hussein's speech. Hussein is a danger to his own people, and his megalomania will bring disaster to them and ruin Iraq, Levy said. He expressed the hope that the Iraqi people would finally realize where Hussein is leading them. Levy spoke hours before Aziz informed Gorbachev of Iraq's willingness to accept the Soviet plan. But at that point, he told Israel Radio that if the Soviet initiative were allowed to succeed, it would result in the constant threat of instability in the region. Hussein would continue inciting the Arab masses, Levy believed, and other Arab leaders would imitate him and endanger moderate regimes. In New York, Israeli Consul General Uriel Savir said the world should remember that the tiger did not turn into a cat. He said Hussein had opted for war 3 times in this decade: Iran, Kuwait, January 15th, and he's opting for war again. Savir said, quote, "The danger for the area, for his country, and for the Arab-Israeli conflict is the combination of the devastating conventional and non-conventional arms and the cruel nature of his regime. The outcome of this conflict must find a solution to both." End quote. On February 26, 1991, the following article appeared in the Jewish Telegraphic Agency entitled "Two More Scuds Strike Israel." As Allied troops pushed into Kuwait and Iraq, executing the long-anticipated ground war, 2 Scud missile alerts kept Israelis awake through the early hours of Monday morning. Following sirens that sounded at 3:30 and 5:30 a.m. local time, the missiles, fired from western Iraq, came down on Israel but caused no casualties or damage. They were the 38th and 39th missiles launched at Israel from western Iraq since the Persian Gulf War began 5 weeks ago, and the first since the ground assault was launched in the weak hours of Sunday morning. Civil defense authorities said the missiles landed in the area designated Zone 6, which covers the southern part of the country, including the Negev. The alert did not stop longshoresmen at Haifa port from unloading 8 Dutch Patriot anti-missile batteries sent to Israel by the Netherlands government to help in its defense. The Patriots arrived by sea from Bremerhaven, Germany. They will be operated by Dutch Air Force specialists who flew to Israel on Sunday. The Dutch Patriots, of the type designed to bring down enemy aircraft, will have to be modified to intercept missiles. Meanwhile, Israel Radio, which had stopped broadcasting weather reports since the war started, advised Israelis on Monday that a line of thunderstorms was working its way south through the country and said not to panic if they hear loud noises.